backdoor marriages to wealthy and famous men are almost as legendary as their comments on the subject. Zsa Zsa, never one to mince words, once said, "I want a man who's kind and understanding." Is that too much to ask of a millionaire?
When you walked into a restaurant and you saw those three ladies there, they were like tabletop beauties. They were like flowers sitting there, and every head in the room would turn and look at the Gabor girls because they were all three beautiful.
One of the easiest way to wake up the palate and the various other senses is to add a little spice. And the Gabors were the spice. And suddenly, people felt like they're tasting certain dishes the first time in their lives.
I think I made them sweat.
What a lovely
Perfume. I know you're a
Clorox. I love that.
They're all very funny. Magda was not funny, but Eva and Zsa Zsa are always very funny. Witty, I guess, would be the best word for them. They had great wit.
What did you put it there for?
To keep the shirt from falling down.
They were the first real subjects of the tabloids because their lives were all over the world and terribly interesting. A lot of very famous people were enmeshed with them in a lot of their pranks.
In the aftermath of World War I, Budapest, Hungary remained a jewel-like city, a sparkling gem cut in half by the Blue Danube River. It was the center of Hungarian commerce, and among its most successful entrepreneurs was Francesca Kenda Tillemann, a stylish and formidable woman who owned a jewelry establishment called the Diamond House. Her beautiful daughter, Jolie, aspired to a career on the stage. She also wanted to be accepted into high society. But her family was considered nouveau riche. Jolie put her dreams aside and at the age of 17 married Vilmos Gabor, an elegant man who was in the jewelry business. He was 20 years her senior. Their first daughter, Magda, was born in 1917. Another daughter, Sari, was born 2 years later. She was nicknamed Zsa Zsa, after a famous Hungarian actress. Then Eva, the third daughter, arrived. Another girl did little to help the Gabors' increasingly unhappy marriage.
Jolie, the mother, wanted to be an actress. Her husband wouldn't let her. He wanted her to give birth to sons. And with each girl arriving, he was furious.
Vilmos would always have a tempestuous relationship with his wife, and he could also be intimidating to his daughters.
The father was very, very much of a disciplinarian. So much so that sometimes when he'd come home, Eva told me she would hide under the piano and peek out at him. She was terrified of him.
Zsa Zsa, however, was not afraid of her father. She adored him. She was a tomboy and tried to take the place of the son her father longed for, and would always measure other men against him. Jolie Gabor now focused all of her frustrated ambition on her daughters. They would be stars and fit to marry kings. She raised them in a splendid villa with every privilege money could buy. The girls were trained in all the social graces, as well as music, dance, and sports. Jolie also set a standard for glamour and fashion that her daughters would spend the rest of their lives living up to. The pressure to win Mama Jolie's approval was intense. The household seemed driven by one force.
Total rivalry for Mama's love and affection. And Mama played them like a great violin. She knew exactly how to cause trouble between them.
But the Gabor sisters established their individuality in spite of trying to please their mother. Although Magda was the perfect student, her sisters were not as interested in academics. Eva was determined to become an actress. The always flirtatious Zsa Zsa had mostly romance on her mind.
Apparently, when she was born, and only when a male leaned over her cradle, she smiled. So apparently she started early.
At the age of 13, Zsa was shipped off to Lausanne, Switzerland to study at the exclusive Madame Sibylla's School for Young Ladies. There, she refined her command of languages and dance, but was otherwise miserable at school. When she returned to Budapest at the age of 15, her mother entered the budding beauty in the Miss Hungary contest. Zsa won the title, but it was taken away, she contends, because she had not reached the official age of 16. Others said that the contest's organizer discovered that Jolie had tried to bribe the judges.
And even though Zsa was by far the most beautiful of all the girls, he insisted that the second runner-up should be Miss Hungary.
Jolie softened the blow of this defeat by taking her daughter to Vienna for a vacation. There, the lovely teenaged Zsa was discovered and cast in an operetta called The Singing Dream. Zsa fell in love with show business and refused to return to school in Switzerland. When her parents objected, she decided her only option was marriage. For this role, Jolie had prepared her daughters well.
She really groomed them to be a wife for a wonderful man. And whoever got one of these girls got themselves a thoroughbred.
Zsa was still only 16 when she wooed and won the heart of the Turkish press attaché to Budapest, Burhan Belgi. He was almost 50, but the marriage gave Zsa what she wanted: a new home in an exotic land and high social position. Although Zsa has said that her marriage to Burhan Belgi was never consummated, she claimed that she'd had a clandestine affair with Turkey's ruler, Kemal Ataturk. Whatever the truth, Zsa was emerging as a woman of the world. By 1938, she would leave her husband and adopted country for good. But she would not be returning to the Hungary she had known as a child. The advent of World War II would change everything for the Gabors. On September 2nd, 1939, Hitler and his Nazi army invaded Poland. Magda Gabor, now married to a Polish count, joined the Hungarian resistance. She secured a high-priority pass to drive a Red Cross truck, risking her life to help prisoners of war escape Nazi camps in Hungary.
I can't come up with anything which would indicate how horrifyingly dangerous that must have been when she did it. It was, the odds of surviving was 1 to several million.
Magda was committed to staying in Hungary even as the war escalated. But in 1939, her youngest sister, Eva, became the first member of the family to leave the country. She went to London, where she married Eric Drimmer, a Swedish doctor. But she was more determined than ever to be an actress, and the couple moved to Los Angeles shortly after their wedding. Hollywood seemed a promised land of opportunity. It was the golden age of the movie business. Eva Gabor certainly had the requisite beauty to make it on the big screen, even if she had no credits. But the gates of the studios did not immediately swing open for her. She finally got a screen test when her dentist recommended her to an agent, and she won a $75 a week contract at Paramount. She used every skill she had learned as a child to convince producers and directors to cast her in good roles. Whatever the part required, whether it was dancing, athletic skill, or just looking good in any costume the studio threw her way, she was prepared to fill the bill. To improve her English, she constantly went to the movies. Her favorite actor was John Wayne.
And before long, she was sounding like John Wayne. I remember once she had said something to me once. She says, "I'm telling you once and I'm telling you again," just like the Duke.
Though Eva's screen presence was luminous, the studio didn't quite know what to do with her. She was cast in small roles in B-movies like New York Town and Forced Landing. She moved on to 20th Century Fox, where she appeared in a handful of equally forgettable films such as Song of Surrender. On June 3rd, 1941, there was some good news for Eva. Her big sister Zsa had arrived in America. The reunion with family brought solace at a time when Eva's marriage was crumbling. Zsa Zsa was at her side when she was granted a divorce from Eric Drimmer in 1942. The sisters became roommates in Hollywood, but they were hardly living in the style to which they had become accustomed back in Hungary.
When Zsa Zsa came over, I mean, they had a little tiny apartment together, and when they would go out to dinner, like with a bigwig, they would sneak the food and put it in their purses and carry it home so they'd have something to eat the next day.
No matter how tough things were, they kept assuring their mother that they were living like movie stars. They also dressed the part when they appeared in public, an important lesson they'd learned from Jolie.
They were all very, very, very picky about what they wore and what they looked like, and that did come from my grandmother.
The beautiful blondes from Budapest dated only the pick of Hollywood's most desirable and eligible bachelors.
They felt they were above this oasis in the desert out here, and that they were much prettier and smarter and better bred than the domestic variety of glamour girls.
Zsa Zsa was also a natural scene stealer. She was constantly written and talked about, even though she'd never been in a single film. She was the center of attention at fabled LA hotspots like Ciro's and Mocambo.
She was gorgeous. She had a buxom figure. She had an accent that couldn't be beat. And she was arrogant from the moment she arrived.
It wouldn't be long before Zsa Zsa would conquer more than just the Hollywood social scene. She caught the eye of one of the wealthiest men in the country. Soon, the Gabor name would be world famous.
You are watching The Gabors on Biography.
I take care.
Throughout the early 1940s, the armies of Adolf Hitler continued their juggernaut through Europe as country after country fell to the Nazis. Still, Vilmos Gabor, his daughter Magda, and wife Jolie continued to live in relative safety in their home in Budapest. That would not last for long. In 1941, the United States entered the war and Hollywood mobilized. Most members of the show business community were either in the service or volunteering their time at USO canteens. This included Eva Gabor. Zsa Zsa had her eye focused elsewhere. She started to date a tall Texan by the name of Conrad Hilton. He'd made millions in the hotel business, and his enormous wealth was not lost on Zsa Zsa.
She came over here with a gleam in her eye. She wanted to marry a multimillionaire, much more than she wanted to become an actress or a star, but she wanted to become a star to land a multimillionaire, so they were kind of twin aims.
Zsa Zsa always said to me, you know, Annie, whether you're rich or poor, it's always nice to have money. And, you know, she's right.
It didn't matter to Zsa Zsa that she was more than 30 years younger than Hilton. She was set on marrying the divorced father of three because he reminded her of her adored father, Vilmos. Hilton wanted to play the field, but in the end, the hotel baron's fascination with Zsa Zsa won out. He married her in Santa Fe, New Mexico on April 10th, 1942. Zsa Zsa immediately found herself competing for his attention.
Conrad was kind of lost in thought and was not making the customary moves for a wedding night. And she says, "Darling, what are you thinking about?" She says, Conrad says, "I'm thinking of buying the Blackstone Hotel in Chicago." And geez, that really upset Zsa Zsa, you know, because she is really delicious in those days. How anyone could think about hotels in bed with her is beyond me.
Eva would also marry again, 1 year after Zsa Zsa became Mrs. Conrad Hilton. Her Prince Charming in uniform was Charles Isaacs. Isaacs was not only well-bred and handsome, he was the heir to a real estate fortune. The couple married on September 27th, 1943. Eva would now be a hostess to be reckoned with, entertaining all the movers and shakers of the studios who had not welcomed her as an actress. In reality, marriage did nothing to diminish Eva's burning desire for a career. Before long, she would have to choose between stardom and wedded bliss. Within a year, she was off to test herself on the New York stage.
She was tenacious. She always was one to try and attain certain things. She had goals, and come hell or high water, she was going to get that. She was going to get them.
When Ava arrived in New York in 1944, the bright lights that illuminated Broadway belied the fact that World War II was entering some of its darkest hours. In Hungary, Hitler's troops were rounding up all those working with the resistance and anyone with Jewish blood. Magda's activities and having some Jewish ancestry in the family made the Gabors targets. Zsa and Ava knew that their parents and sister Magda must leave Hungary or be killed. They went to Washington to plead for help from government officials. Arrangements were made for the Gabors' safe passage to the United States. The family reunited in New York in the winter of 1945. Conrad Hilton warmly welcomed the newly arrived Gabors and put them up in suites fit for royalty at his Plaza Hotel. But things were not going well between Zsa and Conrad. He was away from home more and more, and she threw herself into an almost around-the-clock spree of parties.
She just got so wound up, just like a top, just got so wound up, so tight. She wanted the house to be beautiful, the food to be beautiful, the music to be beautiful, her clothes to be beautiful, and the marriage beautiful. And, you know, that's like a little girl living in a dream world.
But Zsa could not seem to escape from her dizzying social schedule. It began to wear her down, and she reportedly became addicted to sleeping pills and uppers.
She would fly off the handle and get irrational, and then, of course, regret it afterwards. And she was under the care of doctors for many months in her life, and would go out of control and have to be treated.
The tensions in the Hilton marriage reached the breaking point. Finally, in 1945, Conrad won a legal separation from Zsa. Zsa wasn't the only Gabor facing divorce at this time. Her mother Jolie was leaving her husband after 30 years of squabbling, separating, and passionately making up. Vilmos Gabor returned to Hungary and married his secretary. He would never come back to America. In an era of post-war prosperity, the enterprising Jolie Gabor was determined to make a new life on her own. She had very little resources except that quality that Hungarians credit with achieving success.
The Hungarian definition of Hungarian is that he goes in behind you at a revolving door and comes out ahead of you. Somehow, probably has some validity.
Jolie opened an upscale costume jewelry store on Madison Avenue and turned a minuscule investment into an enterprise worth millions. She came up with a unique style of mixing real gems with fake stones. Her hard work, charm, and savvy salesmanship soon attracted investors and rich and famous clients. Jolie considered her daughters her best advertisement. They were the most precious gems in her collection. But she found that with Zsa, there was no such thing as free advertising.
Zsa would fly in and borrow some jewelry from her mother's shop, and half the time she'd forget to bring it back, and Jolie used to get so mad at her, you know.
Zsa was always unpredictable. Before her divorce from Conrad Hilton was finalized, she became pregnant after a visit with him, and in 1947 gave birth to a baby girl she named Francesca. Zsa's divorce gave her a substantial financial settlement, and she was soon lighting up New York's social events as a single woman. At one party at the St. Regis Hotel, she spotted George Sanders, an actor she'd fallen madly in love with when she saw him in the film The Moon and Sixpence. Sanders had made a name for himself playing quintessential cads in such films as Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. When Zsa finally met him, she discovered that he could be as insufferable off-screen.
He was not impressed by her glamour, her accent, and he always had a partly snide attitude toward her and gave her orders, and she obeyed them because she loved her George, and he was always a bit disdainful with his English reserve.
Nevertheless, they began an on-again, off-again romance and married on April 1st, 1949. At first, it seemed a perfect match of Zsa's beauty and wealth with talent and inner-circle Hollywood connections. Still, Zsa had no illusions about George Sanders.
My mother used to always say a funny line, the problem with George, we were both in love with the same person. But, you know, that she was in love with him and he was in love with him.
In 1951, Sanders' career was in high gear. He won the Oscar for his virtuoso performance as the acid-tongued theater critic Addison DeWitt in All About Eve. Like some of his screen characters, Sanders could be neurotic and extremely possessive. He flew into fits of jealous rage when he suspected Zsa Zsa of being unfaithful. Still, George insisted on maintaining his own residence and left his wife alone for months at a time when he was shooting a film. During one of his absences, Zsa Zsa agreed to appear on a TV talk show called Bachelor's Haven.
She was hilarious on that show. And a woman called in and says, I have a husband who travels all the time, and I think he travels to other women. What should I do with him? And Zsa Zsa says, shoot him in the leg.
Soon, everyone knew of and was talking about Zsa Zsa Gabor. She was suddenly the most sought-after guest on television.
Do you think a girl should marry for love or for money?
Well, for both, of course.
Well, how can she for both?
Well, just because a poor fellow has some money, you can still love him.
The media was completely smitten with Zsa Zsa. Life dubbed her the hottest property in Hollywood. She signed on for her first film in 1952 in the aptly titled Lovely to Look At. She stood out among some of Hollywood's biggest musical stars, playing a beautiful flirt. She didn't need any dialogue for the camera to fall in love with her.
Hey, I got news for you. You ain't getting through to me at all.
Everything Zsa Zsa did, she did with a flair and with a flounce. Whether it was a talk show, whether it was a movie, she just had that electricity about her.
And the beautiful Gabors had also sparked a new American phenomenon. They were becoming the first true celebrities. As one social observer put it, they were famous for being famous. But celebrity would not come without cost. By the start of the 1950s, the Gabor women were firmly established in America. Mama Jolie's Madison Avenue jewelry shop was a favorite haunt of the rich and famous. Magda, the eldest Gabor sister, worked in the salon with her mother. She also shared the microphone on Ava's ABC radio talk show. She was not as showy as her sisters, but those who knew her were impressed with the striking red-headed Gabor.
Magda spoke 18 languages. Now, whether this is a highly exaggerated trivia or not, but even if she spoke 8 languages, it was quite extraordinary.
Younger sister, Ava, was still looking for her big break as an actress. In 1951, she was cast in the live TV production L'amour, la Maria. It led to her Broadway debut in the Richard Rodgers musical comedy The Happy Time. The play was a hit, and Life magazine described Ava as a glorious success with a bright future on the stage. Her triumph was tempered by the reality that her second marriage was at an end. Ava simply loved the limelight more than her life with Charles Isaacs. She would also discover that being a Gabor was not necessarily an asset for gaining a reputation as a serious actress.
She said it was the toughest thing in her whole life was being a Gabor. She said she wished she could have been another name. She would have probably done better as a serious actress. But she said by that time there had been so much publicity that nobody could take them seriously. They were celebrities and they knew it.
As for Zsa Zsa, the steady spotlight often spilled over into her private world. Still, she tried to be an attentive mother. Her young daughter, Francesca, was part of her well-publicized, globe-trotting lifestyle.
We went everywhere together. We went to Europe together. In fact, I had the first hula hoop in Rome. We had a wonderful time. I mean, she traveled a lot because she was working all over the world.
Little Francesca Hilton was showered with attention by her grandmother and aunts, as well as her mother. Even though Francesca was a bird in a gilded cage, and Zsa Zsa was never totally conventional, the two seemed to adore each other. But by 1952, it was clear that Zsa Zsa's marriage to George Sanders was beginning to cool. She was no longer content to wait at home while he went off on location. She jumped at the chance to play the pivotal role of Jeanne Avril in John Huston's film Moulin Rouge.
They only pretend to upload my song. What they really want is another glimpse of my broken heart.
didn't have a big part, but she was the soul of the Moulin Rouge. She was the Moulin Rouge. She's from that era. I know in another lifetime she must have lived there. She must have lived there, and she must have lived in the royal courts of Hungary in another lifetime.
The night Moulin Rouge opened, Zsa Zsa met a man with whom she would make another kind of history.
International playboy Porfirio Rubirosa, the Latin lover from the Dominican Republic, is in 6th place.
Rubirosa had already gone through 3 wives, including American heiress Doris Duke. Zsa Zsa also found him irresistible. The two began a scandalous affair. It was played out on a public stage in several countries and ignited a firestorm of media coverage. This did not intimidate Zsa Zsa.
Scandal never bothered Zsa Zsa. She once told me, she says, you cannot beat page 1 publicity.
The high-profile romance also made Zsa Zsa a more desirable commodity in Hollywood. By the end of 1953, she'd made 4 films, including the classic musical Lily. But real movie stardom would elude her. It was in her dozens of appearances on television that she made the biggest impression.
And now, be a good book salesman and go away. I'm doing my spring house cleaning. I'm dusting my diamond.
Oh, yes. Watch out. I don't think that bird is dead.
She was colorful. Zsa Zsa was never a major star or a major actress, but she was a major personality. And if you're a member of the media, you'd rather interview her than any Academy Award winner.
Zsa Zsa's spontaneity and ability to roll with the punches landed her in the mecca of the novelty act, Las Vegas. She was paid $35,000 a week for a gig at the Flamingo Hotel. Her show sold out.
All she did was kind of like a stand-up comedy act. I'll say she was no Frank Sinatra or Lena Horne. She couldn't sing or dance or anything like that. And she was no Milton Berle when it came to comedy, although she got great publicity all the time she was there.
In 1953, the Last Frontier Hotel paid $500,000 for one special appearance by Zsa Zsa, Eva, and Magda together. The audience was mesmerized by their presence. But their appearance was marred by the arrival of Porfirio Rubirosa, who came to Vegas to deliver an ultimatum. Zsa Zsa must marry him, or he would marry Woolworth heiress Barbara Hutton. When Zsa Zsa again refused him, it was alleged that Rubirosa struck her. Zsa Zsa turned the incident into a publicity bonanza. She showed up at one press conference wearing a black eye patch. The soap opera continued at full speed when Rubirosa took off and married Barbara Hutton. He then returned to Zsa Zsa almost immediately.
He should never have married Barbara Hutton in the first place. Barbara Hutton was a sweet woman, but she would be like a dried-up prune compared to Zsa Zsa.
By 1954, George Sanders had had enough. He divorced Zsa Zsa as she protested that she still loved him. While Zsa Zsa was starring in a real-life romantic melodrama, Eva Gabor was turning life into art in the big-screen tearjerker, The Last Time I Saw Paris. Her portrayal of a wealthy woman with many divorces behind her was as poignant as it was ironic.
You really can't tell one of my marriages from another without a program. Husband number 1, for love, failure. Husband number 2, for money, failure, except for the money in the name Quarrel.
Eva was emerging as a polished screen actress. In 1958, she made a major splash in the Oscar-winning musical Gigi. She almost stole the show as the flamboyant mistress of an aristocratic playboy.
But he's so conceited, so superior in an inferior way. I can't stand him. Shall we go?
Then, the same year, Zsa Zsa became a goddess of camp in the low-budget sci-fi cult classic Queen of Outer Space. She satirized her super-glamorous image as the courtesan of an evil queen.
You're very beautiful, Talia.
I'm glad you noticed. It took you such a long time.
I noticed from the first.
And I noticed that I wanted to kiss you from the very beginning.
The Gabors had now made their mark in movies. But for Zsa Zsa, combining a high-powered film and television career with her love life was exhausting. She was growing weary of the demands of her relationship with Porfirio Rubirosa. He became furious when she started dating other men, including one beau who gave her a 22-carat diamond.
He was extremely jealous, and that even if she would just look at somebody, he would freak. And that is kind of a turn-off, you know, for anybody.
Even though all of the Gabors had their share of disappointing marriages and affairs, they had not given up on love. By the late 1950s, Mama Jolie had taken her second husband, Edmund de Sigathi. A former Hungarian freedom fighter, he was a dashing consort for the formidable Jolie. Magda had also found wedded bliss with plumbing business mogul Tony Gallucci. The family gathered for her fourth trip to the altar in 1956. By now, Ava had ended a brief third marriage and had a fling with Hollywood heartthrob Tyrone Power. Before the end of the decade, she would give marriage another chance with stockbroker Richard Brown. It was a true love match, and Ava relished taking on the role of stepmother to Brown's children. In 1958, the Gabor women traveled back to Europe to visit the first man in their life. They had not seen Papa Vilmos in almost 10 years. Vilmos would die in July of 1962, but by then, he had seen his daughters soar to international fame. In the decades to come, there would be more triumphs for the Gabors, but there would also be heartache. As the 1960s began, the Kennedy White House ushered in a new era of style and glamour that embraced the most glittering stars of Hollywood. The Gabors now found themselves in the highest circle of American society, even though they were Republicans.
I remember Zsa Zsa telling me once that when JFK became president, he sent another actress over to invite her to fly back to Washington with him in Air Force One. And Zsa Zsa turned him down and she says, "I don't want to waste the taxpayers' money."
Zsa Zsa was not only friendly with presidents, she was also a favorite of the country's top talk show host, Jack Paar.
I always give advice to young girls. They said, should you marry for love? I say yes, and keep on marrying until you find it.
Oh, you're just a ray of sunshine, Jack.
One of Zsa Zsa's happiest marriages was with television.
My old friend, Zsa Zsa Gabor.
It came along at a time when her career was not booming, but she wanted to stay in front of the public eye. And what better way to do it than on talk shows?
Well, this left the biggest hole in Africa.
I would. Well, you lean over there, Zsa Zsa. Show me that.
I think Zsa Zsa would have liked to have been a better actress and been noted more for her acting, but it wasn't to be. I mean, the sheer weight of her personality overshadowed any acting talent she had. Ava, I think, realized her acting dreams, yeah.
In fact, Ava had been steadily building a significant resume as a stage actress. She'd won the respect of critics and audiences alike, appearing around the country in popular plays like Noel Coward's Present Laughter. She was commanding $5,000 a week, while some of Hollywood's brightest rising stars were making a fraction of that. She'd learned what it took to succeed.
Isn't it beautiful?
Let's go back to New York.
In 1966, Ava auditioned for the role of Lisa Douglas, the glamorous big city socialite who was exiled to life on a farm in the sitcom Green Acres.
What's this?
I'm making hotcakes too for the animals.
And you call yourself president of the Humane Committee?
She was not the first choice. I think they had several other candidates of well-known actresses to play Lisa Douglas. And I gathered that, she came in and read, and the producer said, "That's our Lisa Douglas."
Well, I haven't got anything to do, and I haven't got anybody to talk to.
Well, why don't you take up a hobby?
Good idea.
Fine.
What about diamond cutting?
At the age of 40, Ava had the kind of recognition she could never have imagined. But the rigors of a regular job in a sitcom began to erode her home life with Richard Brown. Their marriage would be canceled before Green Acres completed its 7-year run. Things weren't going much better for Zsa Zsa on the marital front. In 1966, she divorced her fourth husband, multimillionaire Herbert Huttner, and 1 year later married Texas oil man Josh Cosden. But Zsa Zsa found her life with Cosden suffocating, and the marriage would dissolve in less than a year.
I don't know how many son-in-laws Mama told me that she'd had with all three of them, but it was about the same number of states we have in America.
But of all the often married Gabors, Magda seemed to have found real happiness with industrialist Tony Gallucci. She lived like a queen in a castle on Long Island.
She was very generous and sweet, and she, Ava always said, was the richest because she was smart in business.
But Magda's storybook existence was about to unravel. In 1966, she tripped over her dog and fell down a staircase in her home, injuring her head. She then suffered a massive stroke. Magda survived, but her speech was permanently impaired, and she was partially paralyzed. Less than a year after the stroke, Magda would suffer another crushing blow. Tony Gallucci, her husband of 10 years, had a fatal heart attack. Magda was alone again, but she was left with a fortune. The wealthy widow retired to Palm Springs and recovered enough to become a force in local society. Zsa Zsa experienced her own comeback in 1968. She accepted a daring proposal to take over the leading role in the Broadway hit 40 Carats.
I was amazed that she was willing to step into that situation, to step back onto the stage after such a long time. And I had great respect for her for doing that.
Nearing the age of 50, Zsa Zsa was still the quintessential femme fatale, perfect to play the 40-ish lead in 40 Carats, who falls for a very young man. Her co-star, Michael Nouri, got some pointers in lovemaking from Zsa Zsa's former co-star and husband, George Sanders.
And he came backstage, and he said, "Dear boy," he said, "I'd like to, let me demonstrate how to kiss on stage. He said, if I might." And he took Zsa Zsa and he dipped her and he kissed her. And I observed, I watched. And in my determination to do it right, I kissed her and I chipped her tooth. Yeah.
Zsa Zsa overcame the chipped tooth, bouts of stage fright, and technical snafus during her well-received, sold-out run. She seemed happy and fit. The same was not true for George Sanders. In 1970, he suffered a stroke and went into a deep depression. Zsa Zsa never wanted to lose George completely, so she made a casual suggestion that he marry Magda, who was also dealing with the aftermath of a stroke.
She said as a joke, "Why don't you go talk to my sister Magda?" I think she was kidding. I don't think she was serious. And my grandmother all of a sudden thought, "I had a great idea," and the next thing she knew, they were married.
But the marriage only lasted 6 weeks. 2 years later, Sanders committed suicide at his home in Spain. He left a simple message: "I took my life because I am bored and have lived enough." Zsa Zsa was devastated at the loss of the man she called the love of her life. In the years ahead, the Gabors would face more heartbreak, a confrontation with the law, and the end of their modern fairy tale. By the mid-1980s, the Gabors were as famous for their many marriages as they were for their success in business and entertainment. As they grew older, the family grew closer, and Ava and Zsa Zsa even looked more alike. It was something they could use to their advantage.
I remember one time Ava was sunbathing in the nude out by the swimming pool, and suddenly a man up on the telephone pole turned around and said, "Hi, Ava." And she said, "No, no, darling, Zsa Zsa."
When Ava's fifth marriage ended in 1983, she began a whirlwind relationship with old friend Merv Griffin. They traveled the world together and shared their happiness on the medium that had made both of them rich and famous.
I mean, you can almost go with Merv anywhere, but a dearer, most wonderful friend never lived in this whole world. It was the best birthday I ever had in my life.
Birthday.
You say it your way, I say it my way.
Following Ava's lead, Zsa Zsa, now 8 times divorced, also appeared to have found the man of her dreams. Austrian Prince Frederick von Anhalt became Zsa Zsa's 9th husband in 1986. But in 1990, the serenity of Zsa Zsa's world was shattered. She was stopped for a traffic violation and allegedly slapped Beverly Hills cop Paul Kramer. Once again, Zsa Zsa found herself at the center of a media circus.
It was the slap that was heard around the world. Little did we know it would become the trial of the decade for the 80s.
Zsa Zsa, do you think they can find 12 people who can judge you?
That's a funny question.
We had 100 reporters sitting out there, day in and day out, mobbing her on every arrival. And she didn't hesitate at all to just blurt out any thought she might have.
This man should be an actor because he's the biggest liar on the police department, the biggest liars on the world, and I mean it.
Zsa Zsa's family supported her throughout the trial, the first ever to be televised. But in the end, she was sentenced to 72 hours behind bars. She also had to complete 150 hours of community service at a battered women's shelter. Zsa Zsa's encounter with the Beverly Hills cop seemed to set off a dark period for the Gabor family. In 1995, Ava fell and broke her hip while vacationing in Mexico. Upon her return to Los Angeles, she entered the hospital and developed a severe case of pneumonia. Ava fell into a coma, and a decision was made to remove life support. She died on July 4th, 1995.
It was so unbelievable to me. And I've kicked myself and fretted over that ever since. Had I been there, the course might have changed.
Then, in April of 1997, the matriarch of the Gabor family, Mama Jolie, died at the age of 97 in Palm Springs. 2 months later, Magda Gabor, who had been closest to Jolie over the last years of her life, also died. The loss took a heavy toll on Zsa Zsa.
I used to see Zsa Zsa out at parties all the time. I haven't seen her out for years now, ever since the deaths of her family. She's a lone survivor.
Ironically, with all the publicity she has generated for decades, Zsa Zsa, now in her 80s, has become a woman of mystery behind the walls of her Bel Air home. But even though she rarely walks into the spotlight these days, she remains a vivid personality for those who shared the limelight with her.
Her intelligence and her sense of humor, her sense of adventure, her courage, add to that recipe all that she has done with her life, all of her marriages, and you have something that is, bottom line, fascinating.
Zsa Zsa, Ava, Magda, and Jolie Gabor added a touch of sparkle to life wherever they went. If they were sometimes controversial, they were never boring. And the best gift they had to offer was the pleasure of their company.
The Gabor sisters, with all of their beauty and their style, their glamour, all they wanted to do was laugh. And laugh we have.
The Gabor sisters had an uncanny ability to make people, particularly men, feel special. Both Zsa Zsa and Ava gained notoriety for the unique way they purred the word darling. Not so long ago, Zsa Zsa admitted that to be referred to in this way was not actually a compliment. It just meant that the sisters Gabor had forgotten your name.